Who is a career services manager and what do they do?
A career services manager is someone who is responsible for managing the team and building a strategy to support students in their job search at a university. So that can involve hiring and training career advisors and providing the day to day management and support of the teammates, as well as designing career experiences for students, whether that be workshops or classes or mentorship programs, and all of the operations and data that support those activities.
Let's start from your childhood. Where did you spark the interest for this profession?
I think as a kid and then especially as a teenager, I was always interested in psychology and curious about people's behavior and why they did what they did. And so that led me to reading a lot of psychology books as a teenager and thinking a lot about what kind of life people end up creating and what drives those decisions. And so I think that was sort of some of the inkling of my early interest in this space.
You got your bachelor's degree in Boston University, particularly in business management. How did that prepare you for your current role?
Well, I've always worked in career services, working with students going into business careers and students studying business. And so it was important that I had a foundational understanding of how a business is structured and what their goals are and how they achieve those goals. So, at a simple level, getting a bachelor's in business management helped me with understanding the different business units within a company and therefore the different roles that someone might have within a business. And that's been an important sort of foundation for me to have in supporting students with choosing the right roles for their sort of background and their interests.
Was there anything in particular of value in your master's degree, which is in education leadership and policy studies?
Definitely. I think the most interesting part of my master's was when I did an independent study and really looked at the history of the field of career services, as well as the history of business education, which both sort of started around the late 1870s, 1880s timeframe, as well as understanding sort of key shifts that were happening within the United States and the economy at that time. Um, I didn't know until I did that project sort of how the field started and how it came to be what it is today. And so that was really interesting. And I also took a lot of classes on leadership in my master's that were really helpful. And also, just I think an important part of my master's was understanding higher education, the industry as a whole. 50% of colleges in the US are community colleges. And so I had a great teacher who said, if you don't understand community colleges, you're missing 50% of the whole field. So it was helpful for me to learn about that part of what we do.
So, after your master's degree, you got your first job as a recruiter at Beacon Hill Staffing.
Mhm.
What was that experience like?
That was a really interesting job. I ended up focusing my bachelor's on organizational behavior, which was like the part of a business bachelor's that had the most relevance to psychology. So that's what interested me. And a lot of people who did an organizational behavior focus ended up going into HR. And when I read about HR, it didn't spark my interest too highly, but the part I really liked was the idea of interviewing people. And so I had learned that a recruiter's job focuses on interviewing people, evaluating them for different roles. And that's how I ended up at Beacon Hill Staffing Group. So in that role, I would call at least 30 people a day to check in. I would find their resumes on job boards, and I was constantly building a pool of candidates that could be a fit for finance or accounting jobs that I was filling for our clients. I do about 4 to 6 interviews a day with folks who would come in to meet with me, and then I would be understanding what positions our clients had open and checking with candidates to see if it was a fit and helping get the right candidates connected to the right opportunities.
But that was the first job. How did you learn?
To be a recruiter,
Yes.
think there was probably some initial training in my first job. I always had a natural sort of inclination towards interviewing, and I'm sort of naturally very curious about people. So the part of understanding sort of who they were, what they were interested in, that came easily to me, but I'm sure my manager gave me some structure to follow in that role. So, I'd always want to understand what location someone was open to working in, what they were looking for in terms of compensation, what function and type of role they'd be focused on, what level. So I think there was some structure provided, but a lot of it you sort of just learned as you started doing it.
And how did you evolve from that job?
After that job, let's see. So when I was coming out of Boston University, when I was interviewing for my very first job, I had interviewed with a startup that was providing sort of data monitoring services to the pharmaceutical industry. And it was an early stage startup. I didn't end up getting the offer when I interviewed for this project manager role. But a year and a half or so later, that same company called me up and said, we have another project manager role open. We are interested. We really remember your interview from a year and a half ago. Would you want to come over and talk to us? And their office happened to be literally 15 steps from my first job as a recruiter. So I went over for a casual conversation one day and then decided to make the change. I had been recruiting for almost 2 years, and as much as it was interesting, it does get very repetitive, that role. And so I was ready to try something new and went over and joined this early stage startup. I was the eighth employee, doing project management, and they were working within the clinical trial space for drugs that support people with depression and bipolar, which was sort of in that realm of psychology, which was always of interest to me. So I ended up going to work there. After several years at that startup, I was sort of in my mid 20s. And at that point, I kind of stopped and realized that I had always been making my career decisions and my school decisions based on what I thought made the most sense, what was practical, what would lead to a job and security. And I had never really stopped and asked myself, what was I really interested in? What kind of work would be really meaningful to me? And so I went through a 3-month process of really looking deeply at what I was inherently interested in, the type of things that were important to me in life, and what I find meaningful. And I ended up deciding that I wanted to start a business and sort of be my own boss and be an entrepreneur. And that led me to the question of, well, what am I good at? What are, friends and family ask me for help with? And it was often at that time in my life, resume reviews and interview prep and things related to job searching. And so that's what gave me the idea to start my own business doing career consulting. And I started reading all the books I could about it and really diving deep into the career development field.
That technically is a career coach.
You could call that a career coach or career advisor.
And what does that entail?
A career coach, your role is to work with people. It's usually in a one on one fashion to understand who they are, what lights them up, what they're really good at, what's important to them in life, and to help guide them through the process of figuring out what type of job or role they want to do in their career and run a successful job search to get a job like that, and ultimately help people through the decision making process of figuring out what they want to do and what type of work is going to not only allow them to be successful, but also to feel satisfied.
So that's mostly for people who don't know who they want to work as,
Mhm.
not for people who are searching for work.
A career advisor actually helps with both pieces. So some people are not sure what they want to do, and you guide them through the career exploration process. Other people may come to a career advisor and say, I know exactly what type of job I want, and I need help with just the actual tactical part of running a job search, whether it's networking or online applications or interviewing or all of those pieces. So it can be either part of it or both.
And what was the transition point for you from being an individual consultant going back and working in the field?
So I started working with people one on one through, a sole proprietorship that I built. And what I found was that I wanted to get a lot more experience, a lot more volume of working with people in a shorter amount of time than I could get sort of one on one in my business. And so As I was researching the field, I learned there's a couple different avenues where you can do career development work. You can do it in a for-profit company and an outplacement firm. You can do it within a company. Some firms now have a career advisor role built within the company. You can also run your own sort of business, and you can also work in a university or college. And so at the time, I was networking and getting to know people, and I ended up meeting with someone over at Hult International Business School, which is in Cambridge, and they were hiring for an MBA career advisor at the time, and ended up asking me to interview. And when I got the offer, I ended up accepting it because I knew I would be working with hundreds of students with job searches, not only in the US, but all over the world. And I would get a lot more experience in the next 2 years than if I was just doing it through my own business, which would just be a lower volume.
And what was the most exciting thing in that job for you?
The most exciting thing about that job was learning about people from all over the world. The students came from over 70 different countries. And so every time I was meeting with a student, whether we were working on their resume or translating their past job experiences into great stories for interviewing, I was inevitably learning about the world, learning about different career paths. And I found that really interesting and perpetually sort of fascinating.
After started working at Hult International Business School, that is the point where you decided that you want to stay at higher ed and proceed in that field. How did you evolve from your position at Hult International Business School?
So after Hult, I went to work at Boston University. I was at the Questrom School of Business, so still within the School of Business. Someone I had worked with at Hult was interested in having me come over to lead the team. And so that was my first real management and leadership position, where I was in that role career advising MBAs, but also overseeing and managing the MBA career development team, as well as the specialty master's career development team, which at that school they had a master's in mathematical finance and an MSMS program. While I was at BU, I really started to get more experience managing and leading, but was also doing the day to day of a career advisor, where I was working one on one with students and delivering classes and workshops. And after about 4 years at BU, I got a call from someone who was across the river at MIT that was interested in having me come to interview. And that's how I ended up at MIT in a career services manager role, overseeing career advising and education.
What is it that you do at MIT Sloan?
I oversee the career advising and education teams for a couple different programs: the MBA, the Masters of Finance, the Masters of Business Analytics, and a Masters of Management Studies. So I build and lead the team, and I create the strategy for how we ensure students have the support that they need to pursue careers across a great variety of industries. Career services at its basic level encapsulates everything that goes into ensuring that students have what they need to A, figure out what they want to do, two, evaluate different career options, three, sort of do a lot of self reflection and get clear on who they are, and then effectively make decisions about potential jobs or career paths that they want to pursue, and supporting students in executing the job search.
As the Director of Career Development at MIT Sloan, you have a wide range of responsibilities for different programs, with MBA being most prominent one. Can you describe primarily your responsibilities and your approach to developing career development strategies?
So big part of the role is team development and team management. So that involves making sure that all of the career advisors on the team have the right skills needed to do the job. And if they don't, providing more training and support, because the business world is evolving very quickly. So it's also ensuring that we have a foundational advising model in place, and that all of the career advisors understand the model and are using a consistent approach when working with students. There's a lot of resource management in this role as well. So there are a lot of different online tools and technologies and a lot of different materials and resources that students can use in their job search. And so part of my role is evaluating what career tools are out there in the market, choosing which ones we want to offer to our students, ensuring they're presented and organized in a way that students can understand, and then ensuring that the team is trained up on using them and feels prepared to leverage them in advising sessions or in career classes. There's also some curriculum management. So we teach career classes. We also do workshops. So it's understanding from trends with students and in the market, what are the skills that students most need in the current market to run a job search, and ensuring that we have workshops and classes designed to teach them how to do these job search tasks and how to develop the skills that they need to effectively land the job that they want.
What does a typical day in the life of a career services manager look like?
It is a lot of meetings. So I'd say probably 60 to 80% of my day is typically meetings. There's all different types of meetings. So one could be a team meeting that I'm leading with my entire team or one of the sub teams. It could be a one on one with people who directly report to me. So talking to the people on my team and figuring out what's going on in their world, where they might need support or additional resources from me. It can also be meeting with people above me in the org chart, whether that's my manager or faculty members or people from different offices, to ensure that our career services offering is aligned with other parts of the student experience. There can also be project meetings that I go to. So there's a lot of different work streams that my teams manage and that I oversee. And so I may be in a meeting that's focused on employment data. I might go to a meeting that's all about a particular workshop. I may be in a meeting that's about operational strategy or a new career tool that we may be evaluating. So broad mix of different types of meetings, but primarily a lot of meetings. And then during the school year, going to actual career classes and workshops that my team is delivering, and sometimes teaching them myself.
How do you and your team develop career programming and advising strategies to meet the diverse needs of the students?
Well, one thing that we do is we get together and we look at where the friction points are in the student experience of job searching or career exploration. And so when we're working with hundreds of students year over year, you start to see there's some consistent patterns in where they tend to get stuck in the process of exploration or job search. And so then once we've identified what the needs are or what the problems are that we're trying to solve, then we can design career education and curriculum that will speak to those friction points and address the things that students may need to know or the skills that they need to develop to be able to move through those obstacles so that they can ultimately land a job.
And what tools do you use to maintain a feedback loop on the tools that you implement and strategies that you develop?
Simple surveys is a key part of higher education. So students, after an advising appointment, can fill out a quick survey rating how helpful they found the appointment. So that survey data is something that helps me understand if students are finding their advising appointments with my team helpful. We also look at end of year survey data. So it's very common in graduate business programs for the program offices or the school leadership to survey students when they graduate or at key points in their experience. And I'll always look at that feedback as it relates to career to see what we can do to shift or to improve or to better meet the needs of our students. And also just, I think, one-on-one conversations with students, being on campus, having a pulse of what's going on in sort of the general community, and then just looking at data as well will inform a lot of whether what our team is doing is reaching its goal.
Can you walk us through the process of designing a scalable and personalized career curriculum?
When you design career education for students, I think it starts with first understanding who is the student body that you're designing for? What type of roles are they interested in? What do they come into the program knowing? So, what is their sort of baseline knowledge? Um, and what are sort of the learning outcomes? What are the things that you want someone to know after they complete your career, curriculum? And so once you're clear on the baseline, what you want people to know or to be able to do after they take the career course, then you can start designing courses that provide information and also exercises and prompts that allow students to look at themselves and begin doing the self-reflective work that it takes to get to a place of clarity in terms of what you want to do for your job search.
Could you bring up any example of a successful workshop or session that, in your opinion, the way that it was delivered and created was impactful?
Yes, I can think of a great career class that went beyond lecture. There was an initial part of the class, maybe the first 10 minutes, where some core information was provided via a lecture style about
What was that about?
networking, about how networking works. And then the next part of the class was actually a panel of alums who had done the program that the students who were in the audience were doing, and asking them questions about how they learn networking, obstacles that they faced, things that took them sort of many months of experience to learn or to understand, particularly about the US culture, which has a big impact on the way that we network. And so I thought that design of a class was really great because instead of the students hearing from a career advisor how to network, they were hearing from students who were like them, who had similar life experiences and similar goals, and who were maybe 2 years out after graduation. And I think hearing about networking and hearing specific examples shared by people who've done it in a similar context can be a really great way to learn it beyond just hearing a lecture from an advisor.
What technology solutions do you use to improve process efficiency in career services?
We use many different technologies to support process efficiency. A really great example is, VMOC is a tool that a company came out with that uses AI to review student resumes. It automatically puts students' existing resume into, the Sloan format, and then provides a lot of great feedback for students on how they can improve their resume. That was a huge process efficiency because you used to have career advisors spending hours and hours every summer doing, one by one resume review, giving a lot of the same feedback on the same core principles. And so this was a tool that, on the basic advice, was able to automate it and made the process way more efficient for career teams. There are great technology tools to help students prep for interviews. There's different vendors that have different interview prep tools that are designed for particular career paths. So we leverage those. And we also have different tools that enable students to do market research to understand what's happening in a particular industry or where there might be opportunities. So a large variety of technology tools.
Working as a career services manager, you engage a lot with different teams. What is the most challenging part in terms of team communications?
It's just ensuring that everyone is aligned and working towards the same, goals. In my current role, because I oversee career development for different programs, and at Sloan, the different programs run in very different ways. So the age and experience of the students is very different. The way that we partner with the academic program office varies significantly by program. And the expectations in terms of delivery and even communication style is different across the different programs. So it requires a lot of adaptability and a lot of knowing what the unique aspects of each program is, whether that be the colleagues that we work with and their needs, or the students, their timeline, their expectations, and what ways work best in terms of engaging them.
One of the integral parts of working in career services is engaging with employers. How do you handle employer relations within your team?
So, in my current role, I work very closely in partnership with the head of employer relations, and particularly with MBAs. There's a very strong connection between the career advising strategy and the employer relations strategy, because there tend to be some, pretty big firms that recruit MBAs in cohorts every year. And so it's really important that the career advising team that I work with is aware of what core employers are doing, how they're changing their recruiting strategy, and how students need to shift in terms of their preparation to be able to successfully make it to a job offer. So it's a lot of communication in terms of which firms are hiring, who's making changes in their sort of onboarding or evaluation process, and making sure that on an industry by industry basis, my team is aware of what's happening in each industry so that we can effectively guide students to where there may be opportunities.
So, if we put it in simple words, employer relations team, they're the ones who talk physically with the employers and get insights and information from them. And as career advisors, they transcribe that information to the students in an appropriate manner and format.
Yes, in advising sessions, you're going to be sharing some of your sense of what's happening in the market. Absolutely.
MIT is one of the top universities in the world. What is MIT for you?
MIT is a very unique place. It's a place that values innovation. It's a place that attracts really smart, really passionate people who want to solve some of the biggest problems in the world. And it's a place where the opportunity to learn new things is endless. That's what's most unique and striking to me about MIT.
What are the most essential skills for a career services manager to have?
At the most basic level, you've got to understand team management and leadership, so leading teams. You also need to have a foundational understanding of all the core tactical skills for career advising. So you need to understand how job searching works, networking, salary negotiation, how to write a strong resume, cover letters, etc. It is especially valuable if you understand what it's like to be on the other side of the table when hiring decisions are being made. So, if that's former recruiting experience, former HR experience, or having been a hiring manager who hired lots of people, that that lived experience of what it's like to sit on the other side of the table is extremely valuable and helps you understand how hiring managers and recruiters make decisions, which then allows you to guide students to best present themselves to those people in order to influence them, and to help those people see them as someone who's qualified to do the job that they have. Um, you've got to be able to build a strategy, so you need to be able to define a clear goal and then build a strategy that helps you achieve that goal. Um, you've got to be able to manage a budget and resources to understand, what it costs to deliver the services that you're providing, and how to best use the resources that you have to deliver the most value for students. Um, you've got to have the skill of presenting and conveying your thoughts verbally, whether that's teaching a class or a workshop or presenting to students. So that sort of verbal delivery is very important. And lastly, I'd say you've got to have the skill of being able to analyze and understand the job market and analyze and understand industries.
And how do you stay up to date with the current market trends?
So, in my current role, it is using data that we have about job postings and job offers to look and see where year-over-year trends might be shifting. It's reading news articles about what's happening in the job market and in different industries to understand those trends. And it's also, particularly since AI has really taken off, understanding how experts with AI are using it in different fields and then applying that to the field of career services.
Could you give an example of a regular challenge that you experience while you do your job?
A common challenge, I can think of two. One is, how do you scale your services to support hundreds of students? So, someone running their own career coaching business is going to work one on one with clients. They may have max 20 clients at a time that they might be working with one on one, and do hour-long sessions and prepare before the meeting and afterwards. When you're in career services and higher education, you're often supporting, hundreds of students in terms of your team. And so as a career advisor, you may have 120 students that you're, working with. And so a common challenge is figuring out, how do we deliver career advice, career information, and career appointments in a way that scales to be able to support not just 20 clients, but 120 students per se that one career advisor might be working with. So that's a big challenge, is scale. And another challenge is staying up to date with a rapidly changing employment landscape, and then finding the most efficient ways to educate students on what's changing in terms of who's hiring, when they're hiring, and what approach they're taking to evaluating potential candidates. So just that rate of change keeps increasing, which means the amount of information we need to digest, synthesize, and then share with students is increasing.
If you get knowledge of some information which may impact their lives and future employment, you have to not only transfer that information to them, but you also need to confirm if that information is correct and applicable to everyone. How do you diverse information in this field? How do you understand that this situation is applicable to the majority of the students
Mm-hmm.
and this market situation is applicable only to a small piece?
If I take the MBA program, for example, there are a huge variety of industries and functions that students want to go into. And in some ways, it's too nebulous to try to say that our goal as a career advising team would be to know all industries and all functions and how they recruit. So, one thing that we do to be strategic in our approach is to look at, what are the top 10 industries our students are interested in pursuing, and what are the top 10 functions, and really making sure that for those industries, we know who are the key employers, how are they hiring, are their assessments or evaluation tools shifting, and really then having different career advisors on the team focus on different industries and functions. That way we can divide and conquer, and rather than everyone needing to know everything, you've got one person who knows, how the investment banks hire and what asset managers are looking for. You've got someone else who's really focused on technology and, growing tech firms, and then having the team share with each other what they're learning. That's a good way to be strategic about it.
What was one of the most significant challenges you've experienced as a career services manager?
I think something that might be surprising to someone who hasn't worked in this field is that one of the most significant challenges is getting the attention of the students. So we live in a world of just information overload, and I think students in universities are getting a massive amount of emails and information from a bunch of different departments, and they have access to an incredible amount of resources. But it actually takes quite a thoughtful marketing plan to get the right information to the right students at the right time. And so I've always said that I think a big part of career services and higher ed is actually marketing what your team and what your department does to students in a way that the message gets through, all of the information coming at them, and that resonates with them deeply and inspires them to want to engage with your team and to work with you.
How do you collaborate with faculty and alumni to enhance career opportunities for students?
For faculty, for example, one way that we engage them and work with them is understanding which classes the students take with faculty that hit on topics that are relevant or that become helpful in the job search. So, for example, if you have communications faculty who are teaching, different communication strategies, different ways to bottom line a core message, or different techniques for analyzing your audience when communicating a particular message, it's been really great to partner with those faculty members to understand what they're teaching and then to use some of those key frameworks and principles when teaching students about how to communicate in a job search setting, since the core principles still apply. And with alumni are directly out working in the business world. So they have incredible insights into how different industries and different roles are evolving and are changing. So having alumni come and join our career classes to talk about, what it's like to work in different subsections of finance, for example, has been really valuable. Or having alumni share their experience with networking or negotiating, as well as just making sure that we're in touch with the alums who are in leadership and hiring positions out in the market so that they know that they can come back and hire MIT Sloan talent.
If someone would be seeking to enter the field of career services, what are the options?
One, you could look at a university and going straight into, a career advising team at a university. In general, I recommend going and working in the field that you want to be a career advisor for first. So, I happen to work with business students, but there are career advisors that work with law students. There are career advisors that work with, students studying media and arts. And so I tend to believe the best career advisors are those who have worked in the fields that they're coaching students to pursue because they can speak about how it actually works at a much deeper level. So a great way in can be going and actually working in a particular field that you want to then be a career advisor for. Like a lot of former lawyers will, be career advisors for law students. They're going to have a lot more interesting insights, for example, than someone like me who hasn't worked in law. Another great way in is just to go get a job as a recruiter because recruiters do a lot of volume of hiring. So even 1 year of recruiting experience, you're going to see hundreds of resumes. You're going to do probably hundreds of interviews. And that experience gives you really rich insights into career services. You also can look at an outplacement firm or, a for-profit company. That's one pathway in. And so it's sort of figuring out what you want your entry point to be and how you can start to build some of the foundational skills.
Let's talk about the field of career services, how it evolved in the past decade, and what trends do you see currently and in the near future?
Well, career services, in the last, 2 decades, so in the early 2000s and then recently has really become focused on networking. So it's less about matching students to particular jobs, which was a lot of the focus, in the mid 20th century. And it's more about teaching students how to use relationships to um, understand what opportunities are available in different fields, to really get the qualitative information that they need about different companies and different jobs so that they can really reflect on whether a role is a good fit for them, and then teaching them how to leverage a network to uncover opportunities. So it's a lot more of facilitating connections than necessarily helping students identify one particular career path that's the right fit for them. And especially in the last, 5 to 10 years, career services, I think, is shifting a lot more towards helping students understand the factors that drive career satisfaction and helping them evaluate different career paths before they go get a job in it, so that they can increase the likelihood that the ultimate job they end up in is something that they're not only, have relevant skills for and they can do the job, but that also has some real meaning in it for them. Because people tend to, be more engaged and more successful even when they find significant value in the type of work that they're doing.
We have artificial intelligence as the main trend and hype, so to speak, on the market now. How do you see AI influencing recruitment and job search?
I think in one sense, AI makes the job search, some of the tasks a lot more efficient. So whether that's doing market research or creating an initial draft of a LinkedIn summary or a resume or a cover letter, it's phenomenal at those type of tasks, and it makes it a lot more efficient for individuals when they're working on job applications. And I think on the recruiting side for hiring managers, it can actually make their job more difficult because a lot of people are using AI to develop their career materials and
Career materials?
career materials, meaning resumes and cover letters and applications or, LinkedIn. And so it, it is harder to tell sometimes whether someone's application was really written by themselves or by AI. And because it's made applying more efficient, I think the volume of applications that hiring managers are receiving has gone way up, which, although that's a good thing to have a lot of applicants, when you have massive volume, it actually makes your job more difficult because you now have a lot more people to review to find the right fit.
Well, I would assume that recruiters also use artificial intelligence to sort the bulk of resumes that they get to find the applicants that meet the most criteria. Also, we've covered this previously with a few recruiters that AI, when it's browsing through the applications um, from a wide range of people, it looks for direct matches, be that skills or experience. What is your take on this approach? This situation created the necessity for people applying for jobs to artificially change their resume for it to fit that particular job. Um, would that be considered a lie, or is this cheating, or is this the new reality that we live in? And the one who matches the most wins.
I think it can be helpful to use AI to get an initial draft of some career communication, whether it's your resume or a cover letter, and to find the match between your background and your skills and the role you're applying for. I think it gets dangerous when you're using AI to write your career application materials for you and then just submitting them based on what the AI output is. We all know that AI can hallucinate. It will create, examples of things that you have done to make the actual career communication stronger and more persuasive. But if you don't have the actual experience that, the AI has put into your cover letter, for example, that's going to create challenges for you down the line, whether it's during the interview or if you get the job when you're in the job. And so I think it's incredibly important that people use AI in the job search, but that anything that they're actually submitting to a company, they've done an extremely thorough review of to ensure that anything written is representative of real experience that you have and that you can speak to. Regardless of whether one uses AI or not, it's critical that you take the time to customize your career, your resume, your cover letter, your interview answers to speak to the skills that are most important for someone to have to do the job that you're trying to get. If you use AI to help you articulate and find the right words for that, great. If you don't use AI, that's okay as well. What's most important is that you're doing that work to find the words that most resonate with the person that you're speaking to so that they don't have to do a bunch of mental and analytical work to try to understand how your past experience relates to the job that they want to hire you for. The people who do that well, who can articulate how their past experience creates relevant skills that apply to the job that they're going for, are the people who typically get the job. It's critical that you be honest and that you don't misrepresent yourself. But whether you use AI or not to do that is not what's most important. What's most important is that it gets done.
Could you elaborate on the thought that hiring will shift towards skill-based hiring?
Definitely. So I think we're starting to see a trend more and more of companies focusing on actual skills that someone has rather than per se the right degrees or the right previous job experience, because ultimately people are no longer spending their whole career doing one job. They're doing many different jobs. And what typically reflects, the results that someone can produce has to do with their skills, not necessarily their degree. So there are many different ways to gain skills. Some of them are through formal education, some are through training experiences. And then, one of the best ways to develop a skill is actual work experience. So I think employers and hiring managers are starting to think differently and be more open-minded to the different ways that someone might develop a particular skill and focus more on hiring for skills than credentials.
Speaking of credentials, in your understanding, what's the relation between what school you go to and the job you land? You do see that there is a correlation for a high hiring trend for MIT Sloan students, being that the majority of them getting hired before they graduate.
Yeah, I think I've had the unique experience of working in several different schools and, across different levels of sort of tiers. And what I've seen is that the job opportunities that are available to someone, particularly in the business world, if I focus on, the world that I work in, there is a difference of which companies will take a look at you, depending on which school that you went to. That said, there's always exceptions to every rule. But I think when you go to an elite university or, a tier one university that has really strong brand recognition and is known for being one of the best, you often have more alumni working in some of the fields that are harder to break into if you're not at a tier one school, whether that be venture capital or private equity or investment banking. And so it definitely has an impact on what career paths you can break into and with how much ease.
What are the pros and cons of working in a higher ed setting?
There's a lot of pros. One is you just get to be in the wonderful environment that is a college campus. So you're surrounded by interesting people who like to learn, who often come from all over the world. In general, there tends to be decent work-life balance in higher education compared to the corporate world. You often have access to a lot of resources for learning just by nature of working at an institution that's focused on learning. And you can often take classes. I'd say your access to training, to development, to classes, or even degrees. I did my master's degree when I worked at BU, which was great. Are just significant and different than you would see at a corporation. Downsides, it can be more bureaucratic. It depends, of course, on the school that you go to and what their culture is. But a lot of universities have a more centralized management approach. And so it can result in a lot of red tape and bureaucracies and policies to work through. I think another interesting thing about higher ed is that it's not, the business structure is not structured like a for-profit organization. And so the way that budgets are deployed and resources are deployed are very different and may or may not be aligned with the goals of your department. So that can be a unique challenge to work through in the higher ed space. Um, Other cons can be, upward trajectory. Um, People in higher ed, once they're in a role that they really like, often stay there for quite some time. And so, if you're someone who's really interested in moving up and seeing your role change and title change, if you want that to happen frequently or at a fast pace, that can be challenging in higher ed, which tends to move slower and just there's always opportunity to grow and advance, but it may not be reflected in job title per se.
And what is different about working at MIT?
MIT is unique in that it's generally decentralized. So a lot of schools have a centralized approach, very bureaucratic. MIT focuses a lot on a culture that allows innovation to thrive, which is really cool. And so they have a decentralized approach, which means not a lot of red tape. And a lot of freedom to try new things and to experiment, which is really exciting and really fun. The downside of that is that you tend to see more silos since there's not one, centralized group that's tracking everything, and so it can be harder to know sometimes what's happening across the institute as a whole or how the work of two different departments is connecting to each other.
What do you find most rewarding for you about working in career services in higher ed?
Most rewarding for me is definitely just the student stories and getting to know students. I'm still in touch with students who I was their career advisor 10 years ago, um, and really getting to know students when they're at this pivotal moment of self reflection and growth when they're a student, but then also being able to see their career progress, once they leave the school and go work in the business world. Some of these end up being lifelong professional relationships. And particularly since I've worked with a lot of international students, anywhere I travel in the world, I can usually look up an alum who's working in that part of the world and meet with them. And so it's just those individual relationships and those human stories and seeing them evolve over many years. That's deeply rewarding to me.
What are some common misconceptions about career development that you frequently encounter among students?
Let's see. The biggest one, or the one that you sort of hear a lot, is, sort of the misconception that career advisors are there for the tactical parts of a job search and that alone, like a resume review or a mock interview, when in reality, a really skilled career coach or career advisor can be a really key strategic thought partner for a student in figuring out both what kind of role they want and is going to help them create the kind of life that they want to live, but also can be a really powerful thought partner as they think about, approaching the market and evaluating different opportunities. So I think it can go a lot deeper than the tactical part of the search.
Would you recommend any tools that could help an individual to self evaluate oneself in order to understand what profession is more applicable to them?
There are a lot of different career assessments out there. In my experience, there is no one assessment that really just delivers unique insights into what job would be a good fit for someone um, based on them taking that assessment. So I don't have an answer for you of, oh, this one career test. I think exploring different career tests can be helpful. They give you a sense of potentially different themes that are relevant to you. They might give you ideas for you to build a hypothesis around that you can then test. Um, but I think the best approach is really something that's less of one tool and more of, in a structured way, doing reflection to get really clear on your skills and what you're good at, your interests and what you fundamentally want to learn about and spend your time thinking about, and your values, what's really important to you and what kind of life you're trying to build. And then talking to a lot of people and learning about different career paths that are out there and starting to do experiments. I do think AI can be a helpful tool here. It can be great to feed AI, this is what I know about myself. This is my background. You can upload, your resume or anything related to your past work experience and reflections about your skills and values. And then you can say, based on all of this information, what career paths do you think I might be interested in? And it will come up with some different ideas. But I think fundamentally, career development is a process of trial and error and exploration.
If we would strip this down to the very essentials, you are the unit that's right in between the students, the employer, the institution, and your job is to manage the knowledge, the preparation, the assessments, the expectations
Mhm.
in an appropriate form.
It is challenging to manage that many different stakeholders who have different goals and needs and priorities. I think a big part of doing this job well is getting really clear on what the role of the career advisor is, and then proactively setting expectations with students, with employers, with alums, so that everyone knows sort of the guidelines for engagement.
Looking back, is there anything you wish you had known when starting your career in this field?
I wish I had known how a university functions, what factors determine what the goals of the university is, how money gets made, and what senior leadership is focused on, because universities function in a very different way than corporations or for-profit organizations. And understanding that would have allowed me to understand a lot of things that happened earlier in my career that I think at the time were very confusing.
You mentioned that the for-profit companies and non-profit higher ed in this case, they work differently. What is the main difference between them?
I think at the end of the day, there's one clear goal for a company, which is typically to produce, a return on investment for the shareholders, through, profit. In a university, there are many goals. There is not one sort of clear shared goal beyond sort of advancing knowledge for society, which is an extremely broad goal. So faculty and the research side of a university has a particular set of goals. The teaching and professor side has a different set of goals. The way that money flows and is used is not always focused on such a singular goal, return on investment for shareholders, like it is in a company. And so what that means is the way decisions get made, the way that influence moves, the way that money is spent doesn't necessarily follow a similar pattern as you would see in a for-profit company that has a clear shared goal for everyone.
If we would be trying to measure a success of career services programs, what would the main metric for success be? Would that be employment rate of the students?
I think there's three key things you look at. So one is, are the students getting jobs? Absolutely. So that those are called employment outcomes, for example, in business education. So the percentage of students that have received a job offer, accepted a job offer, whether that's at graduation or several months after, that's an important, metric. Another key metric is engagement. So are the students actually coming and engaging with the services and the classes and the advising that you're providing? And lastly is a look at satisfaction. So are students satisfied and, reporting back that they feel that the services that they had were helpful and instrumental for them in their job search.
What advice would you give to aspiring professionals seeking to work in career services?
I would recommend that they get in experience as a recruiter or working on HR, and that they work in the industry that they want to advise for before they go into career services, so that you can speak from a place of life experience to the people that you're advising rather than something you learned perhaps, through reading or through talking to people in the field. I think that real life experience is really valuable. I'd also say if you want to work in career services, it's a highly network driven field, of course, since, we teach this. And so, really building authentic and meaningful professional relationships with people who work in this industry is a key way to getting your first job in the field and advancing in the field.
Rose, thank you for your time. Thank you for this conversation,
My
and
pleasure.
thank you for the knowledge and guidance. It was a pleasure speaking to you today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.